Next up, we have Agnieszka Luchova. Agnieszka is an award-winning landscape architect and urban planner. She studied urban and regional planning at the University of Waterloo, including a year at the Paris School of Urban Planning. She later earned her master's degree in landscape architecture from the University of British Columbia in Vancouver, Canada. As a senior associate at Lamar Johnson Collaborative, she works on a diverse portfolio of projects, from strategic comprehensive plans to parks and plazas. Her projects have been recognized by industry associations such as AIA, ULI, APA, ASLA, and have been featured in various architecture and landscape architecture publications. She has earned grants for her academic research, was an Olmsted Scholar in 2016, and received the Dr. John Wesley Neal Medal from the University of British Columbia. Everybody give a hand for Agnieszka Luchova.
And Agnieszka, you're muted, so you have to unmute your microphone.
Yeah, after all of that, I can't even unmute my mic. Thank you everybody for coming. I'd like to commend everyone for making it out tonight, especially considering that the last 4 episodes of Bridgerton just dropped today. So thanks for not binge watching that at home and coming. My presentation centers on the transformation of underutilized space, specifically placemaking projects on the historically disinvested south and west sides of Chicago. So first, I'd like to focus on a little bit of the context and what brought us here, the global trends and some of that local Chicago context. And then second, I'll dive into the project that we did in the Austin neighborhood. And then lastly, I'll talk about the impact and the ripples of that project. So just to set the scene, these are some of the global trends that we've been observing and dealing with for years, and they were very much accelerated by the pandemic. These trends stretch across social, economic, physical, and behavioral realms. And the bold statements you see on this slide are ones that will be discussed in this presentation. For many of us, these trends were top of mind and part of our shared experience. For example, a trend that was spotlighted and even further accelerated during the pandemic was inequality, and more specifically, the unequal access to open space. People in different parts of the country, world, and for us in Chicago, different parts of our city, had very different access to open space and different allotment of open space per person, which this is definitely something that impacts both health and well-being during regular times, and it was much more evident during the pandemic. So that's kind of the global context we're living in, the trends that are setting the stage for the need for us to rethink underutilized spaces, but also influencing how we design and build these spaces, trends like climate change, power of place, individualistic expression. So as good designers and champions of public space and private spaces, essentially any space that improves people's well-being, we need to respond to these trends if we want to make any sort of lasting change. And how do we do that? So the foundation of our work is placemaking. I'm really glad that Jim talked so much about that. The approach that I'm going to present today is a little bit different. It's a little bit more grassroots, more about social connections, but it's all kind of the same, under the same umbrella of placemaking. I have the definition here because I don't know how to explain it properly, but I'll read the definition for you guys because I've already looked it up. So placemaking is a multifaceted approach to the planning, design, and management of public spaces. Placemaking capitalizes on a local community's assets, inspiration, and potential with the intention of creating public spaces that improve urban vitality and promote people's health, happiness, and well-being. So you guys are probably familiar with the principles of placemaking on this slide, but we'll review a couple of the concepts listed here, and most of them relate to the project that I will be talking about. One that I particularly love is number 6, which is starting with petunias. So it's simple short-term actions that can be a way of testing ideas and encouraging people their ideas matter. And these actions provide flexibility to expand the space by experimenting, evaluating, and incorporating results into the next steps of long-range planning. I didn't hear all the questions you guys had back there because the sound was really bad, but I believe that was a point that was made in the questions. So yeah, so starting with petunias, and I'm very happy to present our petunia project. So that context, we started with the global context. We're moving on to more of a Chicago context. So like many American cities, Chicago struggles with the impacts of redlining and years of discrimination and predatory practices. Areas on the south and west side have been historically disinvested. And a number of years ago, I think like 8 years ago, the administration came out with a Invest Southwest initiative. It's a program that marshals the resources of city departments, community organizations, and corporate and philanthropic partners towards the 10 communities that you see highlighted here. If I were to overlay a map, like a vacant land map over this plan, it would match almost exactly. So these are neighborhoods that really need help and investment. So the first site that we did and worked on was located in the Austin neighborhood on the west side of Chicago, a neighborhood that is very rich in history and culture, but sort of struggling, and especially struggling during the pandemic. And the specific site we looked at was on Chicago Avenue, which is a very busy thoroughfare for the city, but also the economic lifeblood of many communities located along it. So here's our site. It had a little bit of a difficult history. Several years ago, it was a very kind of a hot corner. This corner right here was, there was a lot of criminal activity, let's say, happening. And so then a couple of years after, the sheriff's department put up a temporary trailer and so sort of set up camp there to prevent that activity, which is one way to deal with it. But then they moved to a more permanent space, and then that lot was left vacant, which is when a number of forces came together during 2020 in a very lucky way. So we had a local organizer, her name's Vanessa Stokes, and she identified the site and asked the city to help. The other thing that came together was United Way wanted to somehow help in these neighborhoods, and they wanted to help in Austin, and so they asked the city how they can help. And then the third was a bunch of designers in the city wanted to formed a group called ARC, essentially trying to offer up their services to communities during the pandemic. And so the city connected all of these efforts and partners, and then we were off to the races. So we all met on like a Sunday, and then we had 8 hours to come up with renderings to get buy-in. And the big idea for us was to create a site that drew people in, so attracted the community in, and also sort of radiated out into the street. Because we didn't have a lot of public process early on in the design, in the 8 hours that we came up with this, we really kept the site very flexible. And so the big idea were these 3 courts: a basketball court, a food court, and a lawn. These courts sort of function differently depending on time of day and time of week. So on a weekday, that basketball court would be used for basketball. On a weekend, you could have food trucks that sort of spilled into that basketball court with seating. And then during special events, we had DJs and farmers markets and vendors come and utilize that space. So what was really important for us was to keep that plaza very, very flexible. Another thing that was important for us was to use local contractors to build capacity in the community. So this was the first project of the scale that the local contractor had worked on. He was very invested and eager to get this built. There was a learning curve on sort of both our sides, but it was a way to build and trust in the community, but also build capacity and build up the businesses in the community. Funny enough, so this project they wanted us to finish it in like 2 months. And funny enough, it wasn't the contractor that slowed it down. It was the funding not being released fast enough. So we started, I think, in like July, and they wanted it finished by September. Well, unfortunately, the funding wasn't released, so we started construction, poured the concrete, and then had to wait over winter, because here in Chicago, our winters are quite different from the winters you guys have, and then restart the project in the summer or in the spring. It still was completed in less than a year. I was asked to also talk about some of the minutia of projects like this. So there were some permits that needed to be, this was the first project we had done. And so it was sort of the wild, wild west, and the permits we need to obtain were a little bit different than once, because this you would need for a permanent site. This was meant to be a temporary site. So really the only permitting we had to do was for the paint that came out into the streetscape and the public right of way. Chicago, the city of Chicago and CDOT were a little bit apprehensive, let's say, about this, but I think we really pushed them out of their box. And then on future projects, they were really excited about painting in the right of way. As I said, because this was done so quickly, we didn't have time to engage the community early on, despite having a local partner and partnering with local groups. We didn't hold kind of that traditional public process that you would on different projects. And so we thought of creative ways of involving the community in the building of it. And we held this paint day because this is on a corner of a busy intersection. Drives or cars driving by would honk, and a lot of people would stop and just, even if they didn't see the initial invite, would stop and come help us paint. Another important aspect of the project was to engage local artists. We had, because of the connections, because this came from a community partner, they had connections in the community to connect us with a group that did murals. They also were the ones to connect us with a local contractor. And then, in terms of programming of the space, we wanted something that would be active and multi-generational. So we provided a space both for kids, and then also these picnic tables for seniors. People were having picnics here during the weekend during the pandemic. One of the big and important aspects of the project, and sort of a catalyst for the project, was because during the pandemic, other more affluent neighborhoods in Chicago were able to close down streets and let their businesses sort of spill out onto the street, right? There was limited amount of space indoors, so restaurants had to move outdoors. Well, in neighborhoods like Austin, it would be the neighborhood couldn't afford to close down the street. And so this plaza became a way to provide that spill out space for businesses, both sort of adjacent and an incubator for new businesses with the food trucks or little vendors. What was really cool is that it led to a permanent creation of, or building of, a cafe. And sort of that building you guys saw with the mural on it, it was a vacant building, and the city, somebody was interested in developing that into a cafe. And so that's in progress right now. On projects like this, especially in disinvested communities, that they don't have much trust with the city. What's kind of funny is that there's always money for a comprehensive plan or, a quality of life plan. The city will invest that money, but they will never. So there's a lot of engagement, but then they never actually build anything. And so this project started to build that trust and started to show the community that change is coming and it's not just talk. And then these were just some really fun shots from the plaza during our opening day. The mix of people and the range of ages was something that we were really excited about, that it attracted really everyone in the community. And we held kind of a ribbon cutting, and the current mayor at the time came, the opening of the park, and was so excited about it that she wanted to build 10 more of these in the city. And so she allocated a $10 million grant to build them all over the city. So it was each project was allotted up to $500,000 for design and construction. And so I think up to today, there's been 11 built or something like that. Our group has done 5 or 6 of them, and so I can go over some of the other ones we've built. So the first one we had done after Pop Courts was called Pop Grove. You know, we really wanted these projects to cater to the community that they're in. We wanted to learn from the project. We wanted to make sure that they're different and really respond to the conditions. And so Pop Grove was in an area that was a little bit more desolate. What you can't see here is you know, to gas station across the street, really not very much lacking in green space. We also learned from Pop Courts, we thought Pop Courts was supposed to just be a temporary project for a year maximum. It turned out that these projects will be in the community for longer. So we felt that we could start planting trees and putting in plants and softscapes, things that will grow and will not be torn out, you know, if it's a year-long project. So our approach here was a little bit more soft, a little bit more about providing a shaded grove and some pollinator planting, a space for kids to play in the back. And again, a space for community gathering and fashion shows. Like people asked us on the first day of opening if they could have a fashion show going down this lovely sidewalk. So we used a lot of the same principles we used on that first project. So we held a community paint day. We made sure there was room for vendors. We used local contractors. And yeah, it ended up being a very successful project. I visited it a couple of months ago, and it's really very much grown, and it looks like a grove now. The second project, or I guess the second after Pop Courts, third in the series, was Pop Fit. And this is again a totally different typology. We're actually working on the site right next to it, this sort of large used to be a school that we're turning into a community or workplace innovation center. It's called the Aspire Center. And so this whole campus is being renovated or redeveloped. However, this corner was bookmarked for a building that would be put in the next 10 years. So this corner would actually lay empty. And we decided to do a pop project here as a way of activating that corner while this workforce innovation center is being built. And then also, so in a way, getting the community excited about what's happening around here, and making sure it's not an empty site for 10 years. This community, or this part of, you know, when we engaged local stakeholders, they wanted something more related to fitness. So that's why, you know, there's a soccer field and adult workout equipment. And then the last one that I'm going to present is Pop Heights. This was the first project of the Pop projects we did on the south side. It was also the first park in the neighborhood in over 50 years, which is kind of a crazy stat, especially since if you think about the funding that this received in comparison to what it costs to build a regular park. This is 3 times as big as some of the other projects we worked on. So the team that worked on this took on quite a bit of a challenge, but we had a very strong community partner on this. And again, you know, South Side has lots of history and like very strong community. So it was very much supported. And on this project specifically, the contractor we worked with that was their very, very first project. And so that for them, that was a big deal and great great way to build capacity. I think I'm running out of time. So this is my last slide. Let me just, what did we learn? So the goal, with the goal of creating equitable, community-owned and managed space, these projects created a shared language, moving at the speed of trust of the community. We prioritized design excellence, and the storytelling component allowed community members to share their own experience in their own terms on their own turf. These projects had far-reaching implications for our relationship to public space. And we're just really excited to keep it going. Thank you.
Thanks, Agnieszka. So I'll kind of play telephone here with any questions we get.
Yeah, thank you.
Any question askers, if you can ask them as loud as you can, maybe she'll hear them. If you don't, Agnieszka, let me know and I'll translate.
Yeah, just yell at me.
Yeah, just yell at her, please. Anybody have a question? Okay, so I have one then. Data shows that there's a correlation with the amount of vacant lots in an area and levels of crime in those areas. In your experience, when you're doing these projects and you repurpose these vacant lots, do you see any correlation with that? Do you see an impact on the communities and the levels of crime? Do people feel safer? Or have you collected any hard statistics on that?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So that is something we had asked the city, and that is something that the community partner has been collecting data on. I mean, colloquially, yes, there's been a decrease in crime, but the data, they're still collecting the data on that. What we can see sort of right away was an increase in sort of investment in the areas around these pop projects. Like I said, the cafe opening up right next to Pop Courts, things happening around Pop Fit. We're doing street redevelopment around Pop Heights. So there's an increase in that as well. But that's a great question, and it's definitely something we're tracking here in Chicago.
And have you seen any negative effects? Because sometimes what I found is when you improve a place, right? When you create these kinds of spaces and then property values may rise, there's more economic activity, then gentrification starts to happen, right? Have you seen any of those issues pop up yet?
Quite honestly, not in I mean, these are temporary projects, and these communities really need a lot of help. So this is not really the use case for that, or like that doesn't really apply here. What I didn't mention during the presentation, and it's sort of related, is the importance of upkeep and maintenance of these spaces and programming of these spaces. That was something that I was really concerned with from the beginning, and the grant had, there was a certain allocation from the grant that went to a 3-year maintenance and programming of these lots or plazas or parks or whatever they became. So that was super important. I know that it's sort of a different answer to your question, because these are not strong enough to sort of cause gentrification.
Got it. Great. Any other questions? Yeah.
How do they select sites?
Okay. Did you catch that?
How do they select sites?
Yes.
They had to have the sites were brought forward by they had to be brought forward by a community organization. So to apply to the grant, a community organization had to fill out a bunch of paperwork, had to partner with a designer and a contractor. And then the city, based on all the bids or sort of responses that came in, the city then made the decision. That early slide showed, right, all that the city prioritized the 10, there we go, the 10 neighborhoods or areas that have been historically disinvested. So I think most of the projects and most of the money went to projects in these areas. They also prioritized commercial corridors over other areas because, like I said, one of the goals of this was increasing economic viability.
Yeah.
You mentioned that these pop courts are temporary. How do you see it evolving into a more permanent solution?
Were you able
Yeah,
to?
and that's how do we see this evolving? Yeah, that's a really good question. As a designer and like if I can critique my own projects or these are projects, I worry sometimes that this is like a solution, like a cheap, like the or affluent communities get concrete and steel and these communities get paint. So sometimes I worry about the fact that like this is sort of an Instagram moment or like an they're just it's not a real investment. However, after speaking with the community, our community connections, that they feel like these are test cases for these sites. So we're testing out, can the site later become a park? Can the site become a plaza, or should this be a building? So they see this as sort of these temporary installations that if the city decide, or if this is a good case study for a park or soccer field, then the city will come in and put that in. But yeah, the temporary aspect of these projects sort of it's a double-edged sword. It sort of worries me, but also I think in that placemaking, that first slide, we have to start with petunias. We have to start with these small projects. We have to start building trust in the community, because we can't just keep doing comprehensive plans over and over again.
Thanks. All right, I think we have time for one more question. Yeah, in the back. Okay, were you able to catch
I
that?
did not hear that.
Okay.
No,
So they
but
feel.
I'm sure it was great.
they feel that the identity of each of these projects is very colorful and vibrant. How did you as a designer kind of come up on that?
So the first one, that first one was supposed to be extremely vibrant. That was supposed to catch the attention of this busy corner, this busy street, get people to slow down. So that was the thought process behind that. We had branded at Pop Courts, and then the city sort of stole our branding and called the whole program the Pop program. You can see that they maybe it's my slides that are super colorful, sort of, but they do get a little bit more muted as time. Well, that's not a good example, but this one's a little bit more muted, right? So it really was responsive to the communities. It was a way, if you're making a temporary space to capture attention and provide a bit of life and color into areas that actually have a lot of vacant land.
Great. All right. Thanks, Agnieszka. Let's give it up one more time.
Thank you so much.
I know you're on Central Time, so if you need to drop off because it's late for you,
Thanks again for joining.
All right.
Thank you.
Next up, we have Cody Clark. Cody serves as a principal and director of the Los Angeles office with deep commitment and experience. He uses his previous post as a global leader of environmental graphic design with RSM Designs established industry leadership to bring relevant insight and continuously evolving our studios. His expertise has contributed to an exemplary portfolio of world-class projects, industry publications, speaking engagements, and design education. He's built an award-winning career through creative and contemporary storytelling within architectural and public space environments. Cody believes in building projects around a client-informed process, which is led by asking great questions, resulting in meaningful and economically successful projects. He specializes in transmedia solutions for wayfinding and environmental interventions, utilizing media-driven platforms. He is a prominent voice within the industry through active participation and speaking topics ranging from technology-led experiences to the future of wayfinding and mobility. Let's give a hand to Cody Clark.
Always sounds much more impressive than reality. Yeah, well, thanks for having me. It's great to be here. Great to be with this collective here. I think you'll see a thread here. I think with Jim and Anushka, I think we've set up a fairly good kind of placemaking narrative from different aspects. And so for RSM, our roots are really in social interaction, people first. So our values, that's our number one value as a company, but we thread that through every single one of our processes and methodologies and designs. So today I'm going to present a project just down the street from y'all on Commons out kind of west of the Strip. And we'll talk a little bit about kind of new ways of kind of celebrating connections. See if I can get my slides to move forward. Now, hopefully we're on a big pile of dirt slide here. So you'll probably recognize this for anybody who is adept at kind of visualizing this. This is when we started. So we started with a developer called Matter Real Estate. And Matter's out of San Diego and Las Vegas. And we started kind of what I'm really going to kind of talk about on this journey is really the importance of a few things. Not necessarily about the buildings, not necessarily about kind of plant selections and kind of fundamental things that everybody in this room really knows about. It's really about the importance of a vision and the importance of what do you see and who's going to be here and why is that important? And how do you build a space around the people that are currently there, hope to be there, and for generations to be there? And I think that is really, really important. And I think each of the presenters today talked a little bit about that from a different perspective of the design process. But when we started, we typically don't start at this kind of ground zero site. You know, we typically come in further afield after a lot has been already pre-established. But when we started, it was really important for the developer to create something that was really different. And it was a pre-pandemic, middle pandemic, and post-pandemic, project, let's piece. And the vision shifted a lot through that time span. And I think the interesting part is the one that was always the thread of this was how do you create a place for social interaction that's generally outdoors? And how do you get people in an environment where we've spent a lot of time indoors, separated? And how do you encourage people and you design a space that creates a platform to do those things? And so everything we did, here's kind of future state. We're almost there. We're almost there. This is what we're looking at here is really phase 4. We're on phase 3 of phase 4 right now. And the interesting part of this is how do you start to really look at the what we're all accustomed to is how do you phase out the longevity of a project while still holding true to its original inception. And so when we were brought in to create that vision, marry the vision across all the different disciplines with a large consultant team. And how do you start to speak to that from a placemaking perspective and extend the brand into every little corner of the project to make sense? So, one of the central parts of this was not really the buildings. And I think that was an unusual part for, I've been working in this field for over 30 years, and generally it starts with the buildings, right? And in this case, we spent, I can't even tell you how long, maybe upwards to 18 months, talking about the connective tissue of the project. What are the spaces in between? How do we build a project around the spaces in between? And that was not only refreshing, but it was like, wow, okay, this is kind of revolutionary stuff here. And it allowed us to think very differently about the scale of spaces, the purpose of spaces, the connectivity of those, and who would be using them. And that part was really, really critical in starting to craft that user journey. In a lot of cases on our projects, we'll create an experience journey, right? An experience master plan. A lot of disciplines have their own master plan. Ours is experience, right? So how do you overlay the planning narrative and planning master plan, lighting master plan, technology master plan, whatever. So that idea of layering that story to be able to focus on what's important to the people that will be here at different times and different functions, different celebrations, different moments of their day and their year. And so that journey was really, really important. So we had an exhaustive process with a lot of different smart people in the room to talk about the different users. This is not necessarily a beautiful slide, but it functions, it tells the story of how do you start to imagine the journey of individuals and what kind of space do we want to create for them? What kind of offerings, what kind of leasing, what kind of shade, what kind of sun, what kind of moments of interaction, chance interaction, planned interaction, that how do you start to build these narratives and overlay and weave them? And then that's how you create a space, right? So you create a typology of space behind the experience that you're trying to create for someone. Architecturally, it's interesting. Jim talked a lot about this too. And there's, thousands of years of how do you create amazing, amazing architecture in hospitable climates, right? And, we worked with Gensler on this. They designed every stitch of this project from the vertical part of the project. And again, the directive was clear. How do you design a space to engage the outdoors? There's a lot of qualities of space. Hopefully a lot of people in the room have been to this project, and it'll continue to evolve over time. But as you walk through this, I've been to this site, I don't know, 30, 40 times. And every time is different. And every time his day is different, and every interaction is different. And I think the beautiful part of this is how do you encourage the scale of the buildings, the super amenities of the space, the landscape, the water, the art, all of it. We affectionately called it the layer cake, right? And that layer cake was like really important. So every time we would get into a meeting, we had to present it as a layer cake. It was not discipline after discipline in a linear fashion with our ego and our title block, right? It was presented as a collective, because that's the way it's going to be built and meaningfully achieved, right? So our role was really, how do we take that directive of these social connections and how do we start to build emotional needs? The root of our practice is really principle-centered design, right? So people are at the center of that process. And it's an iterative process where we're really understanding, okay, it's principle-led. What's the directive that we're trying to do here? And so for us, those directives were clear, creating a people first, performance, protective, restorative space. And how do you really do that? And so we really started to look at, again, all the materiality as you start to go through here, the furniture, the fixturing, the scales of all the different elements. And for us, that process of principle-centered design it's fairly simple. We all are meaningful creatures, right? As we go through space. And the most important part is, how do we tap into those? How do we leverage what's important to each one of us? And we really cull that down into, how do we create thinking humans, right? How do we engage people using this? How do we activate people? And that's either through programmatic events, like Aneshka's showing. That was like amazing. That's like one of the best projects I've seen in like 10 years. But like, how do we activate people? And it's not activating a space. Like, you can't throw up a mural and think that's activating. If you look at her photos, there's community activation. People are together. They're doing things together. Connection is important to us. And those are group connections. Those are happenstance connections. Those are chance meetings. Those are forced connections, whatever it is. Those create meaning and moments and memory. And ultimately, spaces honestly should be inspiring. Simple ones, beautiful ones, big ones, doesn't quite matter. So each one of those four really guide the way that we start to break down a space. And that idea of kind of thinking and activating, connecting, inspiring. When we go through those series, like the first, when we really think about thinking, it's the idea of, what's the mental connection? How do we do that, right? And for us, we always ask great questions. We want to make sure that we're asking, begin with the end in mind. Like, what is this space going to be? The typology of this space, right? It's not a plaza. A plaza is just a definition. But what is it going to serve? What is it going to be? And that helps us really understand and create love for that space. The same with activation, the programmatic evolution of every space. We all design spaces. Everyone's sitting on this phone call and in that room. We're all designing spaces, right? Right? Kind of proverbial spaces. But what's the evolution of those? What's the typology of those? What's the poetic nature of those spaces? And how do we kind of bring those to life? And then ultimately, I don't know about you, I want to create spaces that people love. I want them to love it. I want them to have pride, ownership, put their mark on it. We're just creating a platform. Designers don't really know. We have a guess, right? It's not the end all be all. The end all be all is 20 years from now. So how do we leverage and create these spaces where people put their own life into them? That's a great space, right? And then ultimately, people have a sniff test, right? People know authenticity, right? People know it. They see it, they feel it. And that idea of, can they see that this space was developed with integrity? Was it developed with purpose and meaning? And that's really, really, I think, critical. So, our understanding is that people's identity are tied to the spaces they go to, the places they meet, right? That's their identity. That's their tribe. That's where they go. That's their community. And those communities change throughout the day and throughout the week, throughout the years. But that relevance is quite amazing, right? Because honestly, we have an opportunity to design these spaces that people call their own and people live in and grow in. And so our goal as placemaking designers is to, how do we put enough? How do we support that? And sometimes it's very unexpected. Sometimes it's over the top, like pop courts, right? But the subtlety of that is unexpected, right? And so I think we kind of owe these spaces a service. I think Jim talked about kind of the not complexity of space. We have this process called 10 by 10, where we want to have 10 interactions within 10 feet, right? Sounds like a lot, but it's really not. And when you think about every space as you walk through a great street, great shopping street, right, or a great place, you'll see way more than 10, right? And it's vibrancy. So we did a lot of things here, and a lot of spaces I think are critical in kind of creating conversation. And the owner, he's a huge music nut too, right? So I had to totally go nerd out on all my music lyrics throughout this whole project. But there's a lot of poetry. There's wayfinding, yes, but minimal, because what we wanted to do was intuitively guide people. So that's why we were brought in very early to say, okay, the guidance of people is not a sign. The guidance of people could be a sign, but it's also an amazing piece of art by someone that's local, that has life and vitality and meaning in that particular space. It could be a building. It could be an incredible tree. It could be anything, right? But we curated that because you want that vitality and that vibrancy and diversity of things. And he was very, very big on this idea of, okay, it has to be more than murals. Murals are kind of like this now catch-all thing, right? And I think this idea of, even when Aneshka is talking about like the transference of like this temporary space to something more permanent, I call that work like a phase 0, right? It's like, it's getting people super excited, vitality, let's start the snowball down the mountain, right? But ultimately, we wanted to be able to layer surprise, because it can't be a one-off thing like a mural. We have to layer things. So we created a haiku, right, for this project that lives in, I don't know, 16 or whatever it is, different places around the site, and you have to go on this scavenger hunt and find them. In some cases, it takes 3 people to unlock the clue. So you got to go find 2 people, right? So again, forced interaction. How do you create change? How do you create people talking to each other? This idea of kind of human potential was really important. So a lot of it is about, how do you guide, but how do you guide intuitively? How do you guide organically? How do you create a backdrop for moments? How do you layer things for the 20th time you've been there that you never saw that thing? That's also really, really important. And a lot of times that doesn't really happen, right? I'll truck along here a little bit more, but art is powerful, right? It has a way of creating moments. So we worked with the client team on, how do you layer art in a way that makes sense, that doesn't feel like just washing surfaces. And so we investigated, worked on an RFP, really curated, okay, how do we do this, right? How do we make this make sense and build that advocacy, but also surprise? And where do you put these things, and what narrative are they telling within the space that they're in? They're not arbitrary. They work as a collective layer cake, right? Which is really, really important. And then that celebration, a lot of spaces never celebrate, right? They just don't. And so I think we really wanted to make sure that, even down to the street sign, that how do we celebrate people that mean something here? And again, there's a lot of different ways to do that, but you'll find a lot of different layers when you go to this project. But for us, you know, that idea of a people first environment is really, really important. It kind of threads through everything we did. And so I think that's really the long and short of it here. I think we're running out of time. So anyway, that's it. Any questions, thoughts, insights?
I'll be your interpreter again. If you
I
can't.
appreciate that. It's a little like the Peanuts, you know, the Peanuts parents, you know, like
Yeah,
when you watch.
yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of like that scenario.
Anybody have some trombone? Any questions? Yeah.
I wanted to ask about the festival, with all the restaurants in one space. I was looking forward to a little bit of verbiage on that. What inspires us this kind of mess hall of several restaurants sharing the same space. I think when I was there, it was very successful, but on one side, it was kind of closed off. I'm seating almost, and the other side, people were fighting behind seating. So I just wanted to hear a little bit about that.
Were you able to catch that, Cody?
Not a thing.
Okay, all right. So his question is about, in particularly the mess hall, right? The food hall.
Oh yeah, the sundry. Yeah.
Right. So yeah. So he was looking forward to some verbiage on that. What brought about that idea of a food hall? And when he visited, it was pretty successful, but it seemed that about like one end of the hall was pretty much kind of like private seating, more of a restaurant kind of a situation, while on the other side, people were kind of struggling to find seating, and it was very busy. So just any insights you can give us on kind of what brought about that decision, or how that thought process was about creating that space.
I don't have a lot, unfortunately. The you know, the Sundries and Michael Mina restaurants collective. Past that, I don't really know much about kind of the programmatic, like how it was designed. We always wanted at the very beginning of the project to have this kind of anchoring the quad, right? The center space, the center green. And it was always meant to be a collective of shops, of restaurant F&B. But as far as like the functionality of how it was designed, I unfortunately don't know a lot about that.
Thanks.
Well,
They went through like 5 different iterations, like yeah.
Cody, David Kim is actually in the room. I don't know whether you want.
Oh yeah.
This question.
Oh good. He should talk about it.
You want to answer this question?
Sure.
Well,
David should talk about it.
introduce yourself.
Yeah,
first.
introduce yourself.
He's is with the.
I know David. I know who David is.
Yeah, no, I'm explaining to the other speakers. Yeah.
Oh, okay, yeah.
David, answer the question.
Oh, I don't know if I can hear from you. See, to answer the question of the sundry was, that was meant to be kind of that giant barn and this rustic modern aesthetic that seems to creating here. In fact, as it turns out, probably trying to create a cozy sit down component of the project that really hasn't panned out. So, but I mean, that's kind of the nature of this type of development. You dare to do something, and then the market gives you feedback, good or bad, and then you adjust. So it's a big work, it's change over time. So we don't do that now. So we're dedicated to that. Spirit vision of itself, and you asked about the origination of the idea, is not new to culinary, but it is new to Vegas. And realized kind of early on, you can't just take California concept and lift it and parachute it in Vegas. You have to understand fundamentally underlying what making it successful. What would that mean? Certainly everything else for those of us who
Right.
the answer is
All right. Thanks, David. Any other questions for David or for?
Knowing what you know now.
So it's for David.
I think we would. You know, I mean, change, the notion of change can go more than in one direction, right? I mean, you should always assume that the underlying concept was flawed, maybe it was an execution. I think, for the sit-down portion of it, expect more. It's the atmosphere, the experience that sits down, and you want, the cozy space, it just seems to be an extension of more farmer casual exposure to multiple food concepts. So in that sense, we probably didn't hit it just right in there. Just daring to do multiple concepts, food concepts, all naturally occurs. Some aren't. So, certainly we gotta ask ourselves, should we just have more multiple concepts, which so turn out really interesting. You just don't know what to order. You have like 20 restaurants you can order from, 6 main items, even calling to 6. So, a number of variables and how to do that. So there is a design element to it all together. Concept, which evolution is a successful concept, still out there. So, typical solution.
Thanks.
All experiment.
Great. Thanks.
Hi,
Yeah, you had a question?
Oh, yeah, I'm just curious on how your project integrated itself in the city. I've been to the Uncommons and it does, well, it's like it's really cool to see daily from, like, there's no one walking to there, you have to drive there. And I was just curious on the challenges because there's not really any nearby communities that are walking distance. So it's definitely geared to a certain class. So I'm wondering on, yeah, the challenges.
Okay, so Cody, the question is, how did you approach integrating the project into the city? They have been to the project, and while you're at the place, it's very successful, but it is pretty much a place you have to drive through. That there aren't a lot of communities around there that are like within walking distance, especially here in this climate. So what was your approach, or what strategies did you take into account when designing the space and integrating it into the larger city?
I mean, for the first couple of phases, for sure, it's destination driven, right? And I think I mean, even now there's quite a bit of resi that's coming online, and it feels different. So I think as the resi starts to really infill, you get a very different feeling. Like even a year ago, you walk around and yeah, it has it has a very kind of daytime driven feeling, but like the more residential that starts to infill, you get a neighborhood feeling, which is starting to happen, which is amazing. So I think ultimately that's kind of the phase directive, right? But for sure, it's destination driven. Yeah, it's not in the city, so.
David, what's the average age for the rental units? Average rent for the rental units?
They are, studios start around 1,800 right now, and then to what bedrooms are wide range on those. And houses. Partially, as your question, there are 352 residential units in the first phase. Walked and accepted every single one of them. And we just got TCO on the latest. So if you want to live there. And in the second phase, it's much older, 455 residential. And also connected part of the
think we have time for probably one more question.
Just kind of piggybacking off of her question, and this could go for either you, David, or for you, Cody. What are, if you kept up with the project up to this point, now it's been over for quite some time, what are some successes and what do you consider some failures or opportunities to?
Did you catch that, Cody? No? Okay, so basically the question is, what are some successes or failures, now that you've been able to go out to the site multiple occasions and it's pretty much rolling, what are some failures that you could see you could probably improve upon, or what are some successes that perhaps maybe you didn't anticipate or you did anticipate, if you can give us kind of like those lessons learned from that?
Sure. I think every single project has lessons learned, right? If it doesn't, then you're kind of kidding yourself. But I think the interesting part of it is the evolution of what this space will become. And I think we even with Matter, we've been looking recently at how do you start to tell the news story of what this place really is? Because when you first create a vision of what the place will be programmatically, got the components, you have what you think it will ultimately be in these early phases. It's hard to project the true lifespan of how it will feel and be perceived as let's call it a branded space, right? Because it's a branded space. It's a project, right? And you start to see that now. You start to see how different components need their own presence. How it's the branding of a project has a complexity in mixed use. And I think that's kind of the misnomer, is like you can brand a project and that will stand, and it doesn't. And so I do think that the branding becomes much more complex the further the phases and the more successful and the more evolutions that projects take on. And you have to carefully examine how do different components tell their story in a greater story. And I think that part it's not a failure. There's no failure in a project. So the question is a little obtuse. But I think that the brand evolution is it's not a problem. It should evolve.
Great. All right. Thank you, Cody, everybody. Thank you so much.
We can give you his email. So he can also-
All right. Last but not least, we have Amber Bosket. Amber Bosket is the COO of Energy Tree, a consultation and design company for sustainable technology. She specializes in technology integration, design, and program development that incorporates solar power and other renewables, advanced agricultural technologies, 3D modeling and 3D printing, conservation and sustainability, and more. She has been in these fields for nearly 20 years, and she's been a part of many notable projects across the Southwest. Amber is also a STEM education specialist and CEO of Growing Gears, a workforce training and skills development company. She also writes news and analysis for energytree.org, an online publication geared towards energy, education, and the economy. Amber is currently a lead project developer for the Urban Center for Advanced Agricultural Technologies, located at Zion Urban Farm, where she also serves as director for Urban Agricultural Technical Assistance. Amber has given dozens of presentations at the local, state, and national level, and is an accomplished author and grant writer. Amber has served on many boards and committees in leadership positions and has won numerous awards for her work. Everybody give it up for Amber Boston.
Thank you. And no one can ever get my I'm generally pretty loud, so we might be okay. I thought I might just stay out of the way, but if you'd like me to. Okay, awesome. So it's nice to see you all this evening, and I hope everyone's enjoying this awesome program. Today I'm going to talk a little bit about a public space that's been in development for a little while now. It started out in 2016 as a vacant land. One of the members in the area had said, when we started this agricultural project, had said to me one day, this land has always just been a desert full of trash and broken glass for the last 50 years. And so to see this kind of development happening here where they are, they were really excited to see that. And so it's an urban agriculture facility. We have indoor and outdoor agriculture components as part of the UCAT. It stands for Urban Agriculture Technical Assistance, and it's currently in the process of being expanded. It's a collaborative project between the City of North Las Vegas, Energy Tree, Growing Gears, and Zion Urban Farm. The UCAT was we developed it by Energy Tree to be comprehensive and to bring elements to this historically underserved neighborhood that is also in a food desert and is also surrounded by some of the highest food insecurity in the valley. So it's not only bringing agriculture, but it's also bringing a space where people can. So this area is actually in a HUD Choice Neighborhoods Initiative area, and so it's actually got a transformation plan that's designed to help say this and that need to improve in the community, everything from education and healthcare to walkable communities and increased access to food. One of the key features of this facility is that it is located in an urban agriculture overlay zone. And it's actually, the City of North Las Vegas was the first jurisdiction in the state to utilize Nevada Revised Statute 278 to implement an urban agriculture zone. And they brought on Energy Tree to help draft that language and work with the planning department to see that through. It was approved through planning as an ordinance in the summer of 2023, and then Zion became the first applicant, so they are the first recipient of an urban agriculture overlay zone in the state of Nevada. So I'll go through the presentation a little bit and talk about a few different things as we go along. You can see some of the different photos here, every photo taken at the farm and at the UCAT, so it's very engaging. So it's my remote.
Do you want to point to the laptop to see what? I give you your manual.
That'll work, Ninja. There we go. Okay, so the first video here, I'm going to show some of that initial development. Really tough soil. So the space has been designed with the community in mind to increase community accessibility. You'll notice that the green pathway around the garden area is actually the area where people can increase their walkability and they can get more exercise. We have a larger senior population in that direct community, so being able to provide access to resources that are beneficial and helping like these joints and stuff like that was actually taken into consideration. So this is a picture of the farm in full bloom last summer. Sweet potato is an amazing crop here that does very well, and you can see some of that right there. And basically is just an example of bringing a green space to a community or to communities that don't have that access. So as we talk about developing public spaces, one of the things as we build concrete, asphalt, pavers, and things that trap heat, you know, you probably heard the term heat islanding popping up a lot more now. It's been around for a while, but I've definitely heard it more often recently. Increasing green spaces and access to tree canopy is one of the best ways to help mitigate that. And so this is being developed in an area with very limited tree canopy and green spaces. So it's providing a resource to the community that they don't have. Thanks, Ninja. So some of the components of the UCAT include the Zion Urban Farm with 64 garden beds, an urban vineyard, a greenhouse, which you saw being developed in the video. We have furrows where we grow vining crops, a pavilion for holding community events in shaded area, the walking track. It's also being powered by solar power for sustainability. And then also there is the hydrosphere. If you saw that in the video, that spherical structure, that's actually a socially engaging area where people can walk inside and then around. And that was actually some of the concept behind that. And that particular sphere actually spent time at Panasonic's 100th anniversary in Japan for a social aspect that made its way to Vegas, and now it's at the farm. So one of the benefits of the UCAT is being able to offer gardening classes, nutrition workshops, and chef's demonstrations. That's a really awesome, engaging way to get the community involved. And we've been able to do that, a lot of that out in the garden. This is an example of one of the workshops. And so one of the aspects here, you can kind of see how everybody's making their way, making safe spaces where people can get around, especially in situations where there's mobility assistance and other aspects. It's really important for, of course, development of any public space. And so that's something that's also being taken into consideration. So at the UCAT, we focus heavily on research and development of different agricultural crops and methods for growing fruits and vegetables in ways that use less resources and increase yield. We use hydroponics, which is growing indoor, well, it can be indoor or outdoor, but it's growing in a nutrient solution instead of soil. So it can be very customized. We do a lot of data analysis, and we use sensors and automation to track all of our data. We do a lot of work with light configurations, because you can do that with hydroponics. You can do it using natural light, but when you end up augmenting your light, you can really customize even the output of what color your leaves will turn and what kind of nutrients that they develop. So this is a collage of things that have been grown at the UCAT, some indoor, some outdoor. And we also integrate the nutrition and chef demonstration side of things. So you're going to see a little bit of that as an example of one of our demonstrations. All right, chicken is ready for the salad. It looks and smells delicious. The fresh thyme has been added. I added that at the very end of cooking so that the herbs retain a beautiful vibrant color and a fresh flavor.
Now it is time to harvest the lettuce and the arugula for our peach green and arugula salad. I'm gonna start on this wall, and I'm gonna harvest romaine, oak leaf, and red leaf, because I think that the colors together are beautiful. Let's see here. I try to harvest from the edges. Because that allows the plant to continue growing from the center. Look at this beautiful leaf. Really well hydroponically. I have seen it grow in many different types of units and different structures, and it is always happy, so. I'm just gonna cut them, stacked, really gently. Hear how crisp they are. That's natural food of fresh salad, I think. Smells so good. Excellent. I think that is a nice size for the salad today, so.
So on the side, I'm also a chef if you can. One of the best ways to get people to try new foods, especially when it's for nutritional purposes, is to show them how to use it. And so by increasing the food accessibility in the community, showing them what those next steps are is part of that bigger picture. Oh, you're already there. I'll talk about that one for a minute. So there's also an expansion right now of the urban food course that's underway. There's already about 43, no, actually we've got about 60 now after the AIA tree planting. We have about 60 trees right now. Some are already in full fruit production. And then we have a current plan to expand it all the way to the front of the space, adding another 50. And so we will have a nice sized orchard, again, in a community that not only doesn't have access to tree canopy and green spaces, but the nearest grocery store, a full service grocery store, is well over a mile away. So this is tree fruits are a way to offer high quality nutrition and help mitigate that heat island effect by creating that shade. Our orchard also serves as a demonstration orchard, and we're teaching community education classes so that people can come learn what it is that they might want to do in their own yards. So another super engaging way to help out the community. And those are fruits that we're all in production at the farm. Thanks, Jeff. So this is a design, this is the 3D model of the UCAT expansion of the Zion Urban Farm with the UCAT expansion. Some of these things you see are already there and some are forthcoming. So the left side is the orchard, the back is already planted, the front is forthcoming. On the right side, surrounded by the green, is the garden that you saw in the other videos, and most of that's developed, but the dome is forthcoming along with a couple other structures. So I actually have a video to show you what that is going to look like, a nice walkthrough. Go for it. So this facility is located right in the heart of the community. It is actually zoned residential and commercial. There's two parcels in one site. And so because of that locality, the impact that it can have directly on the community is even greater. And again, it does have that urban agriculture overlay zoning district. That's enabling being able to do certain things on those properties that would normally